So me and James have been talking recently about the games that we played when we were young, and we had a kind of flashback moment where we spoke about our favourite games, and we decided to share them with you guys.
Not only that, back when we were growing up, there were some absolute stinkers. So rather than doing the usual of just talking about the games that we love, we're also going to talk about some of the stinkers too.
And there are some absolute stinkers.
So the first one on the list is Batman the video game on the Game Boy. Now, I remember playing this an absolute ton when I was a kid. The Batman series as a whole was quite huge. Even though it was a Tim Burton movie that was adapted into a game, it was still really cool. The levels are really well designed. I just remember playing at least the first couple of levels so many times over and over. I never actually completed the game, but I always wanted to, and it's maybe something that I'll go back to later on. But either way, this is definitely a solid Game Boy title.
So the first on my list comes for the N64, and it's Castlevania and Castlevania Legacy Darkness. Now these were both made by Kobe, who were part of Konami. Castlevania was originally released in 1999, with Legacy Darkness coming out in 2000. Now this kind of suffers the curse of 2D games going 3D and being somewhat unsuccessful, but for me personally, these were my first kind of foray into the Castlevania series. So I had no reference before this. I didn't play Dracula Bloodlines or 1, 2 or 3 in the NES. This was literally the first game I got because it looked fucking cool. I got Castlevania 64 for Christmas, one amazing N64 full gear, and then there was one amazing random day where I came home from school and my dad had just bought me Legacy Darkness, just randomly. I came home from school and he said, "There's a surprise in your bed for you," and it's Legacy Darkness. And these two games both became a big part in my early gaming life, and I still love playing them to this day.
So growing up, my family were big into football, and I think this was their attempt to try and get me sucked in by it, but it didn't really work. But I do remember playing this game a bunch as a kid, and that was Actua Soccer, released in 1996. It didn't really do it for me. I didn't find football games enjoyable, but for some reason, I just recall actually playing this for quite a bit, and I don't know why. It's just one of those things. I remember this game. It wasn't a ton of fun. It didn't have actual teams from back then either. It wasn't like teams like Manchester United or Liverpool or Arsenal. It was like Wales, England, Scotland, Ireland, Brazil, Russia. It was all like European teams, as in like areas of Europe, probably down to licensing or something like that. But yeah, this was a game that I remember playing quite a bit.
So this is Motocross Maniacs. Now this is actually dubbed a platform racing game because you do actually go through different levels in these circuits. This again was released by Konami, but this was released in 1991, so this is a very old game for me. I remember playing this back in the day for ages and never being able to get past the first level. I used to fall the whole time, I used to crash, I used to burn, and after about an hour of that I would just be like, "Fuck this game!" and then I'd just start playing something else. But surprisingly, I actually got past the first level and then I couldn't get past the second one. Another fun thing is, when I was actually capturing footage for this, my wife was like, "I played that game," and then we had a whole big chat about it.
Now, this game, Street Skater, came out in April of 1999 in the UK, and I managed to get my hands on it around about that time. It was just before the Tony Hawk's bubble, and there weren't really many skateboarding games, and at the time I was really starting to get into skateboarding, so my parents bought me this game, and do you know what? It was just so old school, especially when you see what Tony Hawk's did for the genre of that particular game. This was so that you could see they were onto something, but they weren't quite there. This game was designed by Electronic Arts, and it had some of the most amazing songs on the actual game. But my God, you would be sick of them by the time you did it, because it'd be silly little things like you'd have to replay levels over and over, because if you bashed into something, you would lose points. So you had to be pretty strategic with what jumps you were going to do, what things you were going to grind, because if you didn't make it or you fell off, you could potentially be just under the amount that you need to progress onto the next level. Your score would actually go down, and that was super frustrating. Obviously, after this, everyone started getting into Tony Hawk's and Tony Hawk's 2 and Tony Hawk's 3 and so on and so forth. But this was the original skateboarding game that I remember playing, and it was a ton of fun.
And this is James Bond 007. This was developed by Sapphire and released in 1997. Now personally, I'm not the biggest James Bond fan connoisseur. I know there's like a million different movies. I don't know exactly where in that timeline this game falls, but it does have characters like Oddjob and Jaws, who I know are in some of the earlier James Bond movies, and they themselves are iconic. But this game, I remember just picking up one random day, and it was cheap, and playing it, and I loved the first level, and I was stuck for ages on this first level. I mean stuck forever. And this was like before like guides were like a commonplace thing, so I could not find out where to go. And I remember putting it down and not playing it for like 4 or 5 months, and then I picked it up and I was, you know, that kind of thing where like you're not sure where to go. Well, I don't know if anyone else done this, but like you're not sure where to go, so you just kind of go around every section and just start pressing A to see what would happen. And then eventually I found where I needed to go. So aye, James Bond 007 Game Boy. I think you need to get.
Now this game, Crash Bandicoot, coming out in 1996, this was the game that sold me on getting into PlayStation and sort of set off that trend, that lifelong trend of being a PlayStation Sony pony. It is just one of the best series out there in my opinion. It's a platforming game on the PS1. You know, you play as Crash Bandicoot, you're jumping around the levels, you gotta, you know, kill things that are trying to get you. This offered just something a little bit different. I remember going into Dixon's at the time and being offered the choice of either getting Mario 64 or Crash Bandicoot, and this was the one that I chose because there was just something about Crash Bandicoot that was just a little bit different. It looked more fun. I wasn't really too familiar with Mario other than on the Game Boy, and I was like, Mario's cool, but Crash Bandicoot is way better. A lot of people hate this game or find it a bit too hard, and I don't know, it's probably because this was the game that I played a ton as a kid. I just thoroughly enjoy this series, and this game in particular is one of my favorites.
Next up, this is Star Wars Return of the Jedi. This was released in 1995 by THQ, and this is actually a port of Super Return of the Jedi that was released on the SNES in 1994. Now for me, this is a love-hate game because I love the original trilogy of Star Wars, and I remember being out when I was young, having just got my pocket money. Then I came across this game for, like, I'm going to say it was like a $5, and I was absolutely stoked to get this game. And I got home, and it was brutally hard. It wasn't exactly the best game either, and it was just so difficult. But for this video, I wanted to play it because I did go back and play it the whole time.
Croc and the Legend of the Gabbos. Now, this game came out in 1997. To my knowledge, it was supposed to be a Nintendo game. It was supposed to sell on the PlayStation Nintendo system that was working out, but it didn't go that way. So it ended up coming out on the PlayStation. It did come out on other systems as well, but it was just a really fun 3D platformer. I played a ton of this as a kid, and this is definitely something that I still enjoy playing to today. And I just think it's fun. The soundtrack's really cool. The puzzles are really cool. The only thing that really needs to be sorted is the tank controls, but I'm still hopeful that there will be a remake of this game one day, and they will sort that out.
WWF No Mercy and WrestleMania 2000. Now we are talking. In the late 90s, the WWF was going through what's called the Attitude Era, and for me, these two games absolutely exemplified that era in wrestling, and that was my favourite, and that's when I was like absolutely peak wrestling fan. First of all, here, No Mercy. Now, both of these games were released by THQ. Before that was Warzone and Attitude, and they were Acclaim. And I think once THQ took over, they got so much better because they introduced like run-ins that you saw here. They've got entrances, there's weapons. I think you can get backstage at No Mercy. I can't remember, but I need to double check. The controls for this were so simple, were just straightforward, whereas nowadays wrestling just seems so fucking needlessly like complicated, pulling off some moves and stuff like that. You need to be standing at just the right angle and all that stuff. But for me, WrestleMania and No Mercy were just absolutely fantastic, and I played the absolute shit out of these two games. The rosters for both games were absolutely massive, having wrestlers that, you know, you would hardly see on TV, but if you were a fan of them, they would be there. And again, you'd have walkouts there, China walking out with Triple H, the entrances, the ring approaches and stuff like that. My god, all this was amazing. And look how good that crowd looks. I was absolutely blown away with this back in the day. And I played this for ages, and then I remember not playing it for a long time, like kind of getting out of gaming, and then went to my buddy's house, and he's like, oh, I've got WrestleMania. No, he was like, I've got No Mercy, and I was like, oh, let's play it. And he's like, I'll smash it, and I was like, I bet you fucking will, mate. And he smashed me at it. But it's good fun, like, it's still amazing. And going back, I play this all the time now, going back now to record this, man, I was playing this for fucking hours. WrestleMania 2000 and No Mercy need to be played.
Demo discs. Does anybody remember demo discs from back in the day? So I don't know about most people, but in the UK we used to have a PlayStation magazine, and you would get a little demo disc with the actual magazine, and it'd showcase a lot of the upcoming games or games that had recently been released, because this was back in the day before the internet, before you had the opportunity to go out and just press download onto a console. No, they had to come out on physical discs, and this was a way that you would find out about a lot of games. I remember playing Battle Arena Toshinden and like not even knowing what that was, but like just replaying the demos over and over and over for that again. It's how I played the second Resident Evil game. It's how I found out about Gex. It's how I found out about a lot of games like that. You would get just these random games, and then you'd play them, and they'd be like, oh, that's really cool. And then you'd be like, I remember you go to Blockbuster, or you go to, you know, Tesco's or Asda's, and you'd be like, oh, there's that game, I played this on that demo, it's really cool. And it was just a really good way of showcasing a lot of the games that were coming out or did come out at the time. Now, unfortunately, this is a dying art, and I mean, there was just something special about the fact that you could read about the game and then literally play a demo of it and be able to find out what was actually coming up on the PlayStation back then. Like I say, you can still download a lot of these games and stuff today, check out demos of various different things, but there was something special. You'd load up the game, even down to like the music playing in the background was quite quirky. Each one had like an individual style, and it was just absolutely incredible. Thoroughly enjoyed playing through demo discs back in the day, and it really hits me with nostalgia. And they were just something that you'd have piles of, because if you bought the magazines, you'd just get the disc and then keep them there, and you'd be like, oh, where's this game, where's that game, you know, and you just go through until you were able to either buy the game or, you know, rent it or whatever. Because back then, the games that you had were the games that you had, and that was it. So it was a good way to sort of mix it up a little bit and play something different.
Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1. Now, this is the N64 version released in 1999 by Neversoft. It also came out on PlayStation, the Game Boy Color, and the Dreamcast. Now, the footage for this is probably going to wreck your head, because back in the day, me and my buddies who would play this, we used to just do this one line over and over and over again around the warehouse level, trying to get the highest score that we could. And I wanted to see if I could do it again, but unfortunately I couldn't. This was a game that I just went back and played time and time again, and then when the remakes came out there a couple of years ago, I sat and played things start to finish about 5 times. And it's just, this was kind of my early teens, like the music in it. Like, I know it's all the N64 cut down versions, but the music was still amazing. I still remember hearing Primal for the first time. I was like, what the fuck is this? And just, you know, classic stuff. Love this game.
Now, Doom, releasing in 1993. This game is so iconic. I don't really think I need to go too much into it, but this is such an iconic game from the 90s. It was a 2.5D sort of shoot 'em up game, and it was really cool. I absolutely loved this game growing up. It was just, it had the violence, it had the demon monsters and all that kind of stuff, and it was just something that really appealed to me as a kid. I remember actually playing this on PC as well, I believe on floppy disk. That's how old I am. But yeah, no, this game is an absolute classic and still very enjoyable today.
Now, Primal Fear on the SNES. Now, this isn't a game that I exactly enjoyed. It was released in 1994 by Atari Games and came out on multiple platforms, including the Genesis and Saturn and even the Game Boy. But this was one of the games that kind of my brother had on his SNES that we would just sit and play. Some of the aspects of the game are cool. It's by no means one of my favourite games. It's just a game that I used to play all the time. You play as these kind of fucking prehistoric creatures and basically just have to smash the fuck out of each other. And it's all well and good, and there's sometimes these wee guys that run in between you to worship you or something like that. And depends what character you are, you can pick them up and eat them or like swat them away and stuff like that. It's not the best, but it's, you know, a game that I played a lot.
Now, growing up, I was mainly a PlayStation kid or a Game Boy kid, but I did play some SNES, and one of the games that I used to play was Street Fighter 2, releasing in 1991. This game obviously needs no introduction. It is such a unique, well-known 2D fighting game on the SNES. I remember playing this at a youth club back when I was a kid. I used to go to a youth club mainly to play video games. I wasn't religious or anything like that growing up. Even though it was all in a church, I would go to play video games, and there was always a ton of fun versing everyone in, you know, kids my age, kids older, who were masters at this game, just sitting down, and we'd all take it in turns and have these really challenging battles. And I will always remember that quite fondly for Street Fighter 2.
Back in the good old days of Nickelodeon, there was a show called Real Monsters, and I say because I don't know how to actually say Real Monsters. But me and my brother loved the show, and then when the video game version, here is the SNES version, released in 1995, he picked it up, and then me and him would just sit and play this over and over and over again. I cannot remember how far into the game I ever got. I remember it being tricky enough, like it's a good platformer, but it's tricky enough, and I think once you get game over, I think like that's it. But had a good laugh playing this back in the day, and had a good laugh capturing footage for it. And again, the wife saw it and she was like, "Oh, I remember this cartoon." So it's definitely fun.
Another one that some may say is a bit of an unknown title. I don't hear too many people talking about this, but Kula World, releasing in 1998. This was a really fun game. You play as like a Kula ball, beach ball type thing, and the idea of the game is you go and collect keys and unlock the levels and just try and get as far as you can go. And I remember playing this a ton as a kid. Absolutely love it. I know in the US it's called Rollaway, and that may be why I've not heard many people talking about Kula World, but I absolutely adore this game. And again, it's another really relaxed, chilled, puzzle-solving game, and it's great. I recommend everyone go out and play this.
This was another game that I absolutely fucking detested back in the day, but again, because we had limited games, this is the only thing we could play. This is Spider-Man and X-Men Arcade's Revenge, and it is the most irritating video game I think I've ever played. It was released in 1992 by fucking LGN, and it had promise, like it's an action platformer, the same as all these other ones, playing as Spider-Man, playing as a few of the X-Men, but it was just such a pain in the arse, and this is where I fell in love with Storm. And even her level is some weird kind of fucking underwater level, which is absolute bullshit.
Now, around about the same time as me playing Crash Bandicoot, I actually obtained a game called Pandemonium, and again, this game, I must have played this over and over and over. I remember playing the first few levels of this game so many times because I didn't have a memory card at the time, so for those who don't know, you used to have a memory card to be able to save your game. It wasn't like an internal thing, and oh my god, I didn't have one for the longest time when I had this game, so I remember playing at least the first two levels over and over. But in this game, you play as either Fargus, who's a Joker, or Nikki, who's a sorceress. And Nikki was the one who I always played as. And you've just got to kind of go through the levels and get to the end without dying, basically, and doing these brilliant sort of jumps and bounces, and there's all different creatures, and it was just really unique for the time, and I absolutely adored this game. I think it's got such a charm to it, and again, it's one of those that if you haven't played it, I highly recommend you do. It's the best. I still enjoy playing this to this day.
This is a game I'm definitely going to talk more about on the channel at some point, and this is Duke Nukem Zero Hour. Now, this was released in 1999 by Eurocom, and I absolutely loved this game. This was the second Duke Nukem game released on the N64, and this is more from the third person perspective. However, this was one of the amazing games where when you activated like the debug mode, you could get first person, you could access all these like other wee secret things. So like when I used to love activating the cheat menu and just having loads of different cheats. But in this, you basically travel through time to kind of stop an alien invasion, and you go back to like 1888 London and come across like Jack the Ripper, and you go into the future and all that stuff, and I absolutely love it. My biggest memory of this game is actually the day I picked it up. My brother had just got home from town, and he asked me about Duke Nukem. He's like, "Do you know the game?" And I says, "I do, I've got the first one." And he was like, "Oh, there's a new one that's came out, it's on sale in EB Electronics Boutique." So I was like, fuck, I'll have to get that. And I was like, how much is it? He was like, 20 quid. I was like, no way. And this was like 6:30 in the evening. And I remember phoning them. I was like, what time do you close? And they said 8 o'clock. So I remember getting dressed and getting on the bus and then going up to him to buy this game. And I am so glad I did. This is one of my favourite shooters like ever. And it's just one of my favourite games ever in the N64. This needs a remake.
One of my fondest memories was going over to a friend's house and we would play Sonic the Hedgehog 2 because you could actually play this game 2-player. It was fantastic. Releasing in 1992, Sonic 2 was the follow-up to the original Sonic game. Now at this point, I actually didn't know a great deal about Sonic. I didn't realize it was a Sonic 1. It's just not something you think about as a kid. And this game was absolutely fantastic. From the bonus levels to the actual level designs themselves to the music. It was great, and I just have so many fond memories of me and my buddy hanging out, playing some Megadrive, playing some Sonic 2. It was amazing, and like I said, it's still one of those games that I play today, so it definitely left an impression on me. So there we go, guys. What did you think of our list? Were there any games in here that you guys played growing up? And for me personally, like there were some fantastic games growing up.
And it's funny because, like we've said before, like I'd say we could have added about another million games to this list. There's a load of games in this list now that I didn't necessarily enjoy, as you can probably tell, but I added them anyway because, like I said in the video, limited games. Even if you didn't enjoy a game, you still had to play it. You had to play it. You had no choice.
It's all you had. It's all you had. So if you guys enjoyed this, there is definitely more, because I predominantly packed in the games that I played when I was really young. But if we want to look into other games that we played growing up as well, let us know down in the comments below.
And please like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. And James, when will we see them?
On the next video.
Toodles.
Bye!